Showing on the program today, we discuss some issues affecting the judiciary and the need for reforms. My guest is a senior advocate of Nigeria, Emeka Okpoko. Also showing on the program, the Lagos judiciary blazes the trail by being the first judiciary to commence the 2020-2021 new legal year, plus our weekly recap of the trending legal stories in the news. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Shola Shieli. Ahead of the 60th independence anniversary of the country, there's a need to look at how well the country has fared, especially in critical sectors. Our focus on the program today is how well the third arm of government, the judiciary, has fared. My guest, Emeka Okpoko, SAN, has practiced law for over 30 years. He's also handled several high-profile cases and has been a member of the Anambra Judicial Service Commission. At one time, he was also chairman of the panel in charge of the discipline of magistrates and judiciary workers in Anambra State. I began this interview with his views on how well the judiciary has fared in the last 60 years. He gave me some interesting perspectives.
If you talk of how the judiciary has fared, you will look at it from the angle of the government perspective, what the government ought to do, which they have done or which they have not done. You look at it from the larger society. You look at it from the international perspective, because the international perspective have their own perception. Or the international community, they have their own perception about our judiciary. Then you now look at it from within as a member of the legal profession. So it's so many perspectives. Now you look at it from the economic angle, the political angle, political sensational issues, the general normal litigation, the criminal cases. So what I'm trying to say is that it is so very multifaceted. Now, if, for instance, I take it from the angle of government, have they fared well? That's a very sensational area. And for me, yes, you may say, I would rather say that they have the problem. And the real problem there that would determine whether they have fared well or not is, first of all, to consider whether the government has done what is expected of them to oil and accentuate the judiciary in such a way as to enable them deliver justice the way and manner they ought to do. And if you ask me, I will say that there's a failure there. For instance, if you talk of governments, there's no way you will look at funding. Are they really very adequately? Are they even funded? Are they even properly funded? Do they go cap in hands, asking the executive to be of assistance, whereas they are the third arm of government? And the Constitution is very clear on their duties and responsibilities. But is the executive doing the proper thing? I don't think so. The judiciary is having a problem when it comes to funding. Now I talk of corruption. You cannot undermine the problem we are facing in Nigeria when it has to do with corruption. There's corruption, seriously. And a lot of these things are also coming from majorly from the government sector, from the politicians, from the high flyers. It is also a problem. You may even have intimidation still coming from that angle. Therefore, whether that thing has also enabled the judiciary to do well, to fare well, is for me. The answer will always be no. So looking at it from that perspective, I say, I don't think they really have fared well. Because I have also been involved in some sensational cases that have national prominence. And sometimes you see what happens, you're worried. Sometimes you also read what happened, you're worried. Sometimes you see how the thing eventually ended, you're worried. So from my own, let me look at it from that prism. I would say I'm worried whether I would say they've done really very well. I don't. For me, I don't think I run into that conclusion. Then I now go to the larger society, the ordinary man, or the even members of the larger society. Yes, when you look at that perspective, you see that yes, you may find there are cases that are also they are not sensational, but they are very serious cases. Maybe cases that border on commercial litigation, corporate litigation, aviation litigation, telecom litigation, transactional issues, so many issues. Yes, the judiciary may have tried somewhere, somehow there, in my view. But where you will also run into a problem as a practitioner, you will see that cases that sometimes ought to be speedily dispensed with delay. That is why, if you're not careful, you hear a lot. In fact, if you watch, you hear a lot of people complaining that if you go to court, it will drag for years. It is true. It is true. And of course, even in looking at it anyway, one will also take it from a larger perspective. For instance, you go to the administrative sector, you run into problems. They are ready to frustrate you at the registry. Sometimes when your file finds its way to the courtroom, it's a problem. It takes a tortuous journey to get there. So for me, it's also something that I would say, I don't think they have fared well.
I want to go back to one of the issues that you've talked about, and that's the issue of delay in our courts. Recently, the president made a case for the introduction of time limits for civil and criminal cases. How do you think that this can best be realized?
I share that opinion. I shared. Why I shared is that, yes, they said justice delayed can also be justice denied. Now, ask yourself, election petition prior to the amendment dragged on for a long. I was one of the lawyers when they were doing P2B. It dragged on. Some of these cases could drag on until the governor serves 3 years. But after a while, they had to amend the law. Politicians went to protect themselves. And that's why everything is time-bound. That's why if you come to election petition tribunal now, you are in a hurry. You must finish with this so 180 days, otherwise the statute will catch up with you, your case is gone. Why should they not also try to bring it into civil litigation? Why? Why would they not? For me, a provision should be made that gives time within which you must resolve all these cases. So that way, if you are serious and you have to come and do your case and go. The lawmakers, they must pass the law that will say that. And then, of course, the rules will then accentuate it.
What other reforms would you like to see in the judiciary?
Appointment. Fundamental point is appointment. Criteria for appointment. Qualification for appointment. For me, it is very key. Let it be those who are in the core business of practice of law or academics, because they also advocate from that perspective. The business is a technical business. It's not an all-commerce affair. So you need to really understand the nitty-gritty for you to come and be confronted by a lawyer. Because a lawyer that is coming before you most often would have done his research. He's also vast. And he knows when he comes before you, he will know. He can determine you. Therefore, for me, if you meet a judge who was very grounded before becoming a judge, you will know that you enter the court. He will take you up. If you cite an authority, he will cite his own. If you cite, he will even distinguish that authority. But there are places that you go to, you will know that the man is even confused. He's not even sure what you're talking about.
Now, talking about corruption, the federal government is set to establish an agency to manage recovered stolen funds. Do you think that this is a move in the right direction?
One thing with laws I always know is that it's not so much about the law. It is about the implementation. So it's not so much about the law. There's nothing wrong with it. But about the people who manage the law. That's why Professor Alexander Tocqueville will say that for all forms of government, let the fools contend what is best administered. He's the best. So it's about implementation. It's about administration of that law. If that law or regulation is not well administered, still the same thing. You may even find yourself in a worse situation.
What do you think of suggestions in some quarters that the EFCC's role should be limited to investigation of cases, while prosecution should be handled by the Attorney General of the Federation?
Every one of them have their own advantages and disadvantages. That is life for you. There's no situation that you see a perfect position. Otherwise, of course, the Attorney General is the Commander-in-Chief of prosecution. But yes, EFCC has the duty to investigate. And if you say restrict them only to investigation and not be able to, for me, I also will buy that view. Do you know why I will buy that view? Because sometimes when you get there and you see that their prosecutors are beginning to parade themselves like God or think gods, it happens. You see them, they are ready to even ensure that orders of the court are not obeyed. They function as if they are also security men or even army people in charge of prosecution at the same time. That's a combination of the two. So they get more forceful, they are intimidating. But if you share the power, let them do their investigation, then transfer the case to. Of course, but the problem is that the ministry will also have its own problem, which means that over time you begin to see that they may not really have competent hands in the ministry, that's at Attorney General's office, to even do this prosecution. And as long as you don't have the competent hands to do this prosecution, the cases will never ever succeed. Because private practitioners will come and then sweep them off the ground. But if you have the AG's office prosecute and they are sure that the cases can only be delegated or assigned to very strong, competent lawyers within there, I don't think there's a problem.
Still speaking on reforms of the judiciary, there are those who have advocated that regional Supreme Courts should be created to take on general appeals, while the Supreme Court in Abuja should adjudicate on constitutional matters and disputes between the arms of government. Is that something that can work?
For me, is that sufficient to amend the Constitution? Supreme Court has a max of about 21 justices. Then the Supreme Court has 2 courts. So do you think the Chief Justice of Nigeria cannot easily delegate those who will face this arm of litigation?
2 panels.
Yes. So what's that? The most important thing is that the 2 panels are dealing with totally different issues, so there will not be conflict for purposes of stare decisis precedents. So, is that the reason why you start creating 2 Supreme Court? I don't think so. Supreme Court is a very serious court. It's a very serious. The Supreme Court is the court that once it makes a pronouncement, that becomes the law. And if you are not careful, and you create such a situation, you may see where there will be conflicts between decisions from here and decisions from there. What am I trying to say? I don't think it is sufficient a reason for the creation of a regional Supreme Court and the other. I don't think so.
Let me squeeze in this final one for the new weeks. 1,785 of them were recently called to the Nigerian bar. What skills do you think that the new wigs need to possess to thrive in this COVID environment and even beyond COVID?
To survive or succeed in law or in the practice of law or even as a law, even as anybody in whatever you do, there are certain basic elements that are so very fundamental. And if you're a new wig, I expect that you must have such things. For instance, there's no way I will not talk about your vision. You must have a vision for your life. I want to grow up and be a transactional lawyer, like these big lawyers. You, of course, follow your heart. I want to grow up and be a telecom guru. Follow your heart. I want to grow up and be a litigation giant. It is there. I want to grow up and become an activist. So the legal practice or profession is extremely, very multidimensional. It gives you an opportunity to navigate the entire world. There's no area of human endeavor that you cannot thrive in. So a lot depends on your vision. And in developing your vision, For me, your passion is also very fundamental. Passion for what you do is a driving force. So for me, it is for the new week to look at all these things and take a decision. How do I really want to look like in future? Once you know what you want to look like, then follow it. You will succeed.